Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Castello, board certified family practice with CastelloWellness.com and Adventist Health Partners. And today we're going to talk about the Enterovirus D68 or EV68. This has been in the news as a cold virus that's putting children in the hospital at an alarming rate. So let's first start with enterovirus, rhinovirus. These are normal, common cold viruses, and they exist in multiple different forms. And this is why you can get the cold more than once, is because there's multiple strains of enterovirus and rhinovirus, which you don't have immunity to. So what happened with this EV68 is that August 19th, Kansas City, Missouri hospital reported to the CDC that they had a significant cluster of young children with respiratory illnesses requiring admitting to the intensive care unit and oxygen and excessive care as compared to previous years. 5 days later, August 23rd, the University of Chicago Children's Hospital noted a similar cluster and increase in the acute illnesses of children with enterovirus, and both reported to the CDC. So we have rapid swabs that we can do to tell if you have influenza. We have a enterovirus, rhinovirus swab that these children were positive for enterovirus. It didn't tell what type of strain. So these samples went down to the CDC for further subtyping and identifying of what strain it was. This is similar to when the H1N1 or swine flu epidemic hit. We had influenza virus that seemed to be more virulent or serious than the regular influenza virus, sent down to the CDC, and they identified this H1N1. So this virus, the EV68, we've known about it since 1962. It first showed up in California and was identified back almost 52 years ago. So this is not a new strain of virus. The swabs they sent from Kansas City, 19 of 22 of them tested positive for EV68, and the University of Chicago, 11 of 14. So the vast majority of these children who were sick in the hospital in the intensive care unit had this EV68 virus. The children that had it ranged from age 6 weeks up to 16 years of age. The average or mean was about 4 or 5 years of age, so toddler or just a little bit older. 68% of the kids, at least in Kansas City, already had pre-existing asthma. So these weren't completely healthy kids. For the most part, they were kids who had underlying lung infections, but about a third of them actually had no pre-existing lung disease and still made their way to the intensive care unit. Chest x-ray findings on these kids, they had what were called parahilar infiltrates, or darkening of the x-ray around the middle of the chest. And this is very typical of viral infection. So whether it's influenza or cold virus, when we see a kid in the emergency room and he has perihilar infiltrates, without any further testing, almost always we know this is a viral infection. The good news is we're not seeing secondary bacterial pneumonias with these, and this should be identifiable almost right away in the urgent care or emergency room by these perihilar infiltrates. The enterovirus we've known about, again, forever. This EV68 we've known since at least 1962, causes the common cold. Enterovirus causes rashes in certain cases. It's a cause of viral meningitis, viral encephalitis. So when you go to the emergency room and you have meningitis that doesn't kill you, and we don't give you antibiotics, these are viral meningitis. Tend to be spring and fall season. So this is typical season for enterovirus. There is no specific treatment for any of the cold viruses, EV68 as well. It's all going to be supportive care. So if you're sick and you're at home and your lungs are clear and you're not having shortness of breath, you don't have to do anything different. If you end up at the doctor or the emergency room and you have low oxygen or short of breath or wheezing, they're going to admit you and do supportive care. They're going to give you oxygen, breathing treatments, put you on the ventilator if necessary, give you steroids, all supportive care, none of it treating the virus in particular, but keeping you healthy while this virus clears itself. So you don't have to do anything specifically different for this virus. We don't have rapid testing, but if you're sick enough to go to the emergency room, we can tell you that you have enterovirus, and the presumption will be that you have this EV68. If there are significant large clusters, doctors and hospitals can call the CDC, fill out a paperwork, and they'll take these swabs and tell us whether they're EV68 or not. Precautions to try and prevent the disease, same as with the common cold. Hand washing, don't touch your face, avoid people that are sick if possible. If your kid is sick, keep them home, don't send them to school. What's interesting is the majority, so only about 26% of the kids that were admitted with these infections actually had fever, so we can't say if you have a fever, stay home. If you don't have a fever, go to school. It really is going to rely on how sick you are. For these kids that are in the hospital, it's just droplet precaution. So wear a mask if you see the kids, wash your hands after you're done, don't touch your face, nothing unusual. So for right now, don't be alarmed with this virus. It is a common cold virus. It's been around for a long time. There was a small cluster in 2009, 2010 of this virus. It did not make the news as this one has. So the virus has existed. What's interesting and a little bit of a political side note is we've got all these kids coming up from Central America, illegal immigrants underage. We know for a fact they're bringing diseases. They're bringing polio, they're bringing measles, they're bringing chickenpox virus, things that we in general aren't seeing in the United States. These kids are bringing in from third world countries. It is quite possible that someone from a third world country brought EV68 in, and that's now why we're seeing an outbreak this particular year. These kids that are coming in over the border aren't staying in Texas and Arizona and New Mexico. They're being put in Chicago, they're being put in Kansas City, they're being put in California. So it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, to track from an epidemiologic standpoint where these viruses are coming from, because these kids are going all over the country. So if we saw EV68 showing up on the Texas border, then we could say, well, that's a immigrant epidemic issue, but these kids are put all over the place, so it would be impossible to track. And one more reason why we have to have a little bit of protected borders, why we have to be careful when people are coming over by the hundreds and thousands from third and second world countries, is they bring diseases with them. Lice is another good example of that. We're seeing upsurge in lice and other body mites from these type of people, and they're going all over the country. So EV68 enterovirus, been around at least since '62. It's a very minor player, or has been up until now. What you're going to see is more cases of this because we're actually going to start testing for it. So sometimes when we have epidemics like whooping cough or pertussis, the reason why we have an epidemic is not because there's more people getting the infection, but because we're testing it more. So you get people worried about whooping cough or pertussis. One kid comes into the class with a bad cough, he gets tested for whooping cough and it's positive. No, everybody with a cold in the class gets tested for whooping cough, and now we have a whooping cough or pertussis epidemic. So common sense right now, if your kid is very sick, bring them to the doctor. If they got cold symptoms, you don't have to do anything different. Dr. Greg Castello, thanks.